Thanks so much, Chuck. Good in the back there. Yeah. Michelle, thank you for your seminar. I always learn a great deal from you. I mean, oh my gosh, it's just very, very informative. To continue on Michelle's note, the oomph, right? Like to get the oomph going here. So let's continue on this role here about NTM lung disease. And I'm here to talk to you guys about the environment, right? The role of our environment and how it contributes to NTM. And as Chuck said, I'm a basic scientist. So I'm one of the PhDs here. There's many clinicians here that give you all great advice, but I'm a scientist as well. So I'm in the lab all the time, right? Trying to understand these organisms, how they interact with their environment. And actually when I started, I was a microbiologist and an immunologist, right? So this ecology stuff has sort of dropped into my lap a little bit, only because these are environmental organisms and we need to really understand sort of their prevalence in the environment and what other things sort of influence them, right, in the environment. So let's start off here. So this is, NTM microbiology. I'm the microbiologist in the room, right? So this is NTM microbiology 101, essentially. So these are bacteria. Chuck talked earlier about the differences between an E. coli and a staph and an NTM, right? They have this really big, sort of thick, waxy cell wall, right? That makes them very, very resistant to sort of disinfectants, right? Chemicals, antibiotics for the most part. And they have these variety of morphologies, right? So these are actually NTM sort of up close. They can come in a smooth variety, for example. They can come in a rough variety. As others as well too. They can come pigmented, they can come non-pigmented. They have a variety of different forms. And again, 200 different species, right, of mycobacteria. So they all have different looks to them, so to speak. So they also, we heard a little bit of this from Dr. King earlier, right? Resistance to the low pH of the stomach. But if you translate that too, they're also very resistant to acidic environments as well, right? Sort of acidic bogs. And if you have acidic soil, these kinds of things, these bacteria like to grow there as well too. And many of them withstand high temperatures, right? So that's why they kind of colonize our shower heads and our water heaters and sort of warm environments. But just know that they have also cold environments, right? They still like to grow in cold environments as well too. Many of them are metal resistant, right? So sometimes they have an innate resistance to metals and other sort of exposures as well. And so that all to say that they are very adaptable organisms, right? So that's why they can be found in a variety of different places, in a variety of environments, different areas as well too, because they're very adaptable. Okay, so this is work done by Joe Falkenham and others many, many years ago, right? And this is NTM in the environment. I put down here 2000s, right? Maybe about 20 years ago, and kind of how we've been thinking about these organisms in the environment. And you've heard this many times, right? That these bacteria simply surround us. They are known to be found in our drinking water systems. We talk a lot about that. In our built environments, natural waters, we talk about the soil, we talk about dust, right? Some historical studies looking at NTM in cigarette smoke exposures, et cetera, and aerosols, right? And so that idea that they were in our drinking water systems and now it's known as one of the most serious waterborne sort of infections, right? Because they're found in source water, they're found in the treatment plants, distributions, and they get to our homes to cause infections typically. Okay, so Joe Falkenham and others really put up these quotes a few years ago. We predict an increasing incidence of interaction between humans and mycobacteria, right, in the coming years. And so that seems to be proving true, right? We are interacting with them in the environment. Cases seem to be increasing, not just here in the US, but globally as well too, right? So there are a lot of interactions here with NTM in the environment. So I put this slide up to demonstrate that NTM has been identified in drinking water systems in a variety of different areas, right? Mexico and different countries, et cetera. And you can sort of see the prevalence of NTM in these drinking water systems and who is there, right? What NTMs are sort of in those environments. So here, for example, on the top, Mexico, right, 16% of this small study of 120 samples that they looked at in this distribution system cultured Mycobacterium mucogenicum, Mycobacterium avium, but no Mycobacterium abscessus, right? And the trend you can follow sort of down this chart as well in terms of Greece, USA, right, Colombia, et cetera. And then in France, in this one study, 72% of the water samples that they looked at, right, were culture positive for NTM. But so the point I want to make is that we talked earlier about there's 200 different species, right? But maybe only 10 to 15 cause human lung disease, right? And those are the ones that we talk about. So when you see these studies, I would kind of take them with a grain of salt that while they report there's so much NTM in the environment, to me, it's what's there, right? Is it avium? Is it MAC? Because if it's any of the other species, then maybe we won't worry so much about them in the sense of pulmonary disease, right? So which species of NTM is found matters, I think, when you read these reports. So historically, NTM used to be called these like anonymous mycobacteria or atypical mycobacteria, right? Those are the historical terms. And I might argue that it's now no longer anonymous, right? We know about them. You guys all know about them here in this room. They're not atypical as well. And so these are historical studies showing, again, where NTMs are in the environment. You guys know about the shower heads and the shower waters in our household, sort of built environments, soil, aerosols, and of course, spa exposures. We talked a lot earlier about how potentially you could drink some water right from the tap that could have NTM, gets into your stomach, survives the acidity of the stomach, and then reflux right into the lungs to potentially cause infection. And there's also been reports of NTM in ultrasonic humidifiers, right? Some ice machines and how you can get some skin infections. We talked some about the heater cooler devices in the hospital sort of settings as well, and bronchoscopes, and sometimes in the dental units as well. So this is just to show you like there is NTM in sort of these described areas, really sort of associated with water and ice and sort of soil exposures. So we also know that NTM matters sort of where you live, right? And Chuck talked about this earlier as well too, sort of where in the world you live may matter, and the epidemiology has changed throughout the years. So the first map on the side was sort of NTM national prevalence of lung disease in the 1990s to 2007, suggesting that there was a geography almost, right? Where there's less disease sort of on the northern parts of the US and sort of more as you get down to the southern, right? Sort of southern hot coastal waters, right? Hot, humid areas, so to speak. And California was here on the list as a high number, Florida, right? And then Hawaii, of course, was always sort of the top on the list of NTM lung disease cases. And so here is a recent report from Rebecca Prevo's group at the NIH showing NTM culture positivity between 2019 to 2022. I put this up to kind of show that maybe the geography is changing a little bit too, right? So this is more current data showing that maybe southeast parts of the United States are increasing in prevalence as well too. Okay, so it kind of depends on the geography and location. So what's new regarding NTM in the environment? We talked about historical sites, right? These typical sites that we know NTMs are in your households and built environments. But there's some really, really nice studies kind of coming out now recently showing that getting more specific. So for example, the first one, greater water age, right? The age of the water inside the system, okay? Inside the home, the time in the distribution system, in the home plumbing, stagnation time. How long is that water sitting in your house, essentially, right? So that has mattered, and some studies have shown that had to have an influence on Mycobacterium avium. Mycobacterium abscessus and hot water persistence. This is a really nice study showing that it's higher in residences than office buildings. So some groups compared NTM in your office compared to your home, right? And showing some differences here in terms of Mycobacterium abscessus, Mycobacterium intracellulare. It depends on water age and actually square footage, right? How big is the building, right? Is it a small house or is it a big house? Does it have multiple floors, right? And so some of these are now coming out now suggesting that that might matter as well too. And then there are very nice studies in the literature now looking at particular metals in the environment. So molybdenum, for example, has been associated with areas that have higher MAC infections. This is in your environment, this metal that's in your environment. But also other metals like vanadium, for example, has shown to have been associated with areas that have higher Mycobacterium abscessus, right? And so it depends. And so maybe some metals contribute to NTM in the environment. And there have been really nice studies coming out recently looking at the context of NTM in the hospital system, right? Particularly in the context of cystic fibrosis patients. And so really trying to understand where NTM is in the hospital situation, if any, right? And really trying to understand that in that space. All to say really that it differs by the organism, right? So again, like all of us have certain preferences for what temperature we like in the room or what kind of climate we like, right? NTM have very similar sort of things where it matters. It depends on who you are. So if you're an abscessus, you like a certain environment. If you're an avium, you like the other different environments as well too. And now we're sort of teasing this out a little bit more. So there was this really nice paper back in the early 2000s looking in Philadelphia, actually looking at Mycobacterium avium and in the water system, right? And sort of matching that to patient homes. And this is a very nice study from Joe Falkenham and Leah Landy showing that avium that's in the home is also what's in the lungs, right? So they were able to sort of match them together. And so there have been recent reports from the Philadelphia area suggesting that they've been using orthophosphates, for example, right, to treat the piping system, because the NTM likes to grow in these the gunk, right? The gunk, the slimy biofilm in your environment. And so some of these treatments have been done to release sort of this iron sort of corrosion here on these piping systems, and for the orthophosphates to reduce the corrosion on pipes. So it's a cleaner sort of environment, it's cleaner piping system. But what has shown, and this study has shown, is that as you treat the system with more orthophosphates, it encourages the colonization of NTM, right? Mycobacteria. And you can kind of see the before and after slide here in that the orange, the system, the piping before orthophosphate treatment, right, had lower NTM or other bacteria as well too, compared to after treatments. So, there have been long-standing suggestions. Amy and her group have that really nice pamphlet, right? Hope you guys got all of that pamphlet from NTMIR and Dr. Falkenham's sort of prior suggestions and long-standing beliefs about how to reduce NTM in your environment and exposures, right? So all of these have been talked about. Many of you probably do these: clean shower heads and faucet taps, avoid the misting shower heads and really get the big droplet shower heads instead. Ventilate bathrooms, use a water filter, right? Raise the temperature in your hot water system, wear a dust mask, avoid the humidifier, right? All of these kinds of things have been suggested to reduce exposures, reduce your acid reflux, as we just talked about, right? And then there's been a nice study here suggesting that well systems are better, right, than distribution municipal water systems. And so that has been actually shown as a protective factor. Avoiding dust from soil, boiling the water, right? So that has been a very good sort of suggestion to reduce NTM. And there have been studies, we were involved in one looking at the use of those UV bottle water systems, right? That you can actually, put your drinking water in, press the bottle, and UV inactivates sort of what's in there. And we have shown that those are actually really good at sort of reducing. Okay, so not completely, and we talked about this a lot here, is like not completely eliminating the NTM from your lungs and your environment as well, but reduction, right? Reduction in NTM. And so we have shown that some of that has worked as well. This was I wanted to put this study out here because this is a very early on pilot study that we did looking at a variety of different homes in a geographic hotspot. And really because environmental humidity has been shown as a factor that could contribute to NTM. And really it's just like hot, humid environments, right? Where it's hot and humid, like NTM, it's kind of like, the mold on your bread that grows better when it's hot and humid versus the drier environments. And so humidity has been shown to contribute to NTM. And so this is a very small study, 5 different homes, okay, in which we looked at the introduction of a dehumidifier in a shower. Okay, this is a portable dehumidifier here, showing that you can measure the humidity before the shower is turned on. When you turn it on, the average American shower is like 8 minutes. Okay, so you measure the humidity over time after 8 minutes. And in all of these 5 homes here, the humidity sort of goes higher. You put in a dehumidifier, the humidity goes down. And when we culture sort of the shower before the intervention, the humidity, the dehumidifier, we collected Mycobacterium coloniae from the shower head, right? And then we can show that it actually is there after the shower is turned on. So it's sort of released in the shower. And then after post dehumidification, this is home number 1, the NTM is no longer there. But just to suggest that, again, in this very small study, potentially a dehumidifier and opening the ventilation in the bathrooms, right, might help reduce NTM exposure. But we didn't see that in the other homes, but of course, these other homes had no NTM in the shower head biofilm. So more studies, I think, similar to these need to be done. This was a study that, again, a very pilot study that we did looking at shower head filters, a filtration system on your shower head that you can install into your shower head and seeing if they actually reduce NTM. Very small study, and I hesitate to actually put it up here because these are shower heads that actually didn't have NTM. And that was one of the caveats, is that the shower head that we actually were looking at in 4 different homes actually didn't have NTM to begin with, okay? But then when we put this shower head on here, it actually, we actually collected Mycobacterium gordoniae, Phocaecum, Coloniae, and Porcinum after the filtration unit was put on, okay? So it makes us kind of pause to kind of think that here is the shower head pre-intervention, and the post-intervention has a lot more bacteria, suggesting maybe this is not a good system to use typically, at least this one. Again, it's my small pilot study within this small home system. Okay, so there have been really nice groups at the University of Pittsburgh actually have been looking at shower heads as well, taking it to the next level and bringing the shower heads into the lab essentially, okay? So this is a group that actually has this is a lab system where they have 3 different shower heads in their lab. They can affix 3 different types of shower heads, right? And they can look at the differences between the shower heads. So one is just like a control regular shower head. Another one, they did the water, the shower filter. And then another shower head, they tried one that's embedded with silver. Okay, so they have these different variations of shower heads. And they sort of looked at and compared to see if NTM it makes a difference, right? These different disinfection units. So for example, what they did find is that shower head water, essentially that water that was coming out of there, did not differ between the shower head type, at least in the ones that they tested, okay? Each peaked at a shower head as they aged. Okay, so as the shower head gets older, you have more NTM. And sort of the number of days the shower head was in operation, how old was the shower head itself, played a role. Okay, so at least in these sort of early studies, again, it doesn't suggest that these antimicrobial sort of filters contribute to preventing NTM from the shower head. There's been a lot of talk about bottled water, right? Like which bottled water is sort of better, and then should I be drinking bottled water? What we do know is that, and prior studies have shown that these ice machines, for example, right, have a lot of NTM in them. In comparison, commercial bagged ice had no NTM. And then in comparison to your drinking surface water, about 36% were NTM positive, and then groundwater in the 30s as well. And you compare those to bottled water. Again, not many studies out there, but in the ones that are out there, these are very old studies as well too, showed that bottled water actually had no NTM detected here in these bottled water systems. And we followed up with some as well too, looking at different brands, natural spring water versus purified water, water from snow, etc., volcanic rock filtered water, and municipal systems here, showing that, you know, bottled water is not sterile. Okay, number one, it's not sterile, but it does have reduced NTM, or if any, no NTM here as well too, except this volcanic rock filtered bottled water that had some NTM, Muarum and Phocaecum, in comparison to your distribution systems. So we spent a lot of time talking earlier about, you know, there's a geography to NTM here in the US, and a hotspot and an area of the world, the US, that we've been doing a lot of studies in is Hawaii. Okay, so Hawaii, how many people visited, been there? Yeah, so it's beautiful. I'm from there actually, right? It's a beautiful sort of place. And so because Hawaii has the highest numbers of NTM lung disease in the nation, right? I really sort of wanted to figure this out. I'm an NTM microbiologist, I'm from Hawaii. I really wanted to understand what is it about the environment there that has so much NTM, who are the patients, right? Who's getting infection there? And then which NTMs are in this geographic hotspot of exposure, okay? So we spent a lot of time here with many colleagues here at National Jewish and others as well, looking at these environmental niches for NTM in Hawaii. And in this particular study, we collected almost 3,000 different environmental samples from Hawaii. We're talking like showerhead biofilms, kitchen sinks, right? Your soil, your dust from your homes, the built environment, and we compared it to, for example, the natural environment. So more forested areas, more where you would go hiking, like these kinds of areas, right? And we wanted to compare what NTM was there and which were sort of hotspots, and across 4 different islands, right? Oahu, Maui, Kauai, and the Big Island, the most populated islands. And we're still working through some of this data, but this is sort of the preliminary results from this geographic hotspot. We found that NTM, and these are really the ones that cause lung disease, is what we're talking about, were enriched in the built environment. So mainly homes, right? And sort of areas that you would frequently visit in a building typically. These NTMs in Hawaii actually had a preference for iron minerals, specifically hematite in soil there. So soil from Hawaii that had higher iron in it was typically where we would find these mycobacteria, at least in Hawaii. These soils also were more moist than normal compared to dry soils, okay? And again, they had high iron in them as well. Etty Lipner and her group there actually looked at, again, these metals, right? Vanadium, for example, in the groundwater was associated with higher MAC disease in Hawaii as well too. And then we also reported that water transport from, these zones mean streams, okay? So the NTM, we hypothesize that NTM is in sort of the soil in Hawaii, it ends up in the streams, right? It kind of gets into this aquifer system that we have in Hawaii that's underneath the islands, and then this water sort of can come into your homes as well too. We had a project within this big project looking at the feral pig population in Hawaii, possibly like animal reservoirs for infection, right? Because we actually found these Mycobacterium porcinum a lot in the environment. And porcin is like pigs, right? Mycobacterium porcin is pig associated. So we looked at feral pigs in Hawaii to kind of understand them. And we did find these animals potentially had pathogenic NTM as well too, that maybe they're interacting with the environment. And so this is sort of the geographic distribution of NTM in the state that we looked at, again, primarily focusing on the 4 main islands. And so we broke this down between no NTM in the yellow, meaning that we had a soil or we had a showerhead sample that was not, we didn't recover any NTM from, okay? So no NTM in the yellow. And the teal kind of, we had other NTM. So these are your bacteria, the NTM that don't cause lung disease, but they're in your soil, okay? So compared to the respiratory organisms in the purple. So if you see a purple here, that's where we found like a Mycobacterium avium, a Mycobacterium abscessus in Hawaii. And what you don't get from here, but what I'll tell you is that the majority of these organisms that can cause lung disease were mainly associated with where people live, like towns, right, where people live. And again, the built environment of where people live, and more rarely found in sort of the natural areas. So this is a distribution of NTM positive samples among these 3,000 samples here. Oahu was the island that we recovered the majority, 37%, the highest number of environmental NTM was from Oahu, versus Maui, Kauai, and the Big Island as well. And so, you know, we're trying to understand what is the environmental features, right, that could contribute to NTM in this very unique geographic hotspot. And one of the things I always was thinking about was this very active volcano, okay? So it's called Kilauea, you guys heard of it, right? This Kilauea volcano there, it's one of the most active volcanoes in the world, right? And living there, I remember, this is on the Big Island of Hawaii, and I lived on Oahu, right? But even on Oahu, you would see this volcanic smog kind of come in, right, from the volcano, because it's constantly spewing up some ash and whatnot. And people will report, you know, lung irritation, sort of eye irritation when the volcano was sort of active and spewing out. And so we wondered about this and when we were thinking about context in NTM in the environment. And it just so happened that while we were doing these studies in Hawaii, this volcano erupted, right? One of the biggest eruptions in I don't know how many years, the volcano erupted, and we were able to get freshly erupted volcanic ash, okay, from this volcanic eruption. And what we did was we cultured this volcanic ash for NTM, for mycobacteria. And of course, we recovered these very nice smooth colonies that I showed you kind of earlier. They have this like rod-shaped, right, size looking there. They have a rod-shaped phenotype. And then when we look at what NTMs are there, what we did find from this volcanic ash sample was Mycobacterium abscessus, Mycobacterium avium, and Mycobacterium chimera, right, one of the MAC organisms. And so we found it very interesting in the sense that this volcano is spewing out some NTM that actually bind to the ash from the volcano and can move around within the environment. One, maybe to inoculate the environment, to get into the environment as well and to move them, but maybe also when you get irritation, right, potentially NTM could also be involved in sort of that as well too. And we have some very nice pictures sort of looking at, this is the volcanic glass, this ash, okay, that has glass, it has glass in it. And so the pink area are mycobacteria, okay? So these are sort of these bacteria sort of images showing the bacteria is binding to this volcanic ash. And this is a lab experiment, okay? This is actually not within the environment, but this is a lab experiment that we did. And these are sort of higher resolution microscopy images. Kind of these, all of these mounds are that volcanic ash, right? And all the pink is sort of these bacteria, the NTM, that can actually bind to the ash. And you can kind of see that here, the pink bacteria binding sort of to the volcanic ash. And so potentially that could be another exposure. And so with that, we sort of started to think about other environmental pollutants that could be associated with NTM. You think about inhaling pollution and your lung irritation, et cetera. And so we had transitioned from the volcano to looking at wildfires, right? Because that has been sort of increasing in the US and what have you. And so we had small pilots at the time looking at NTM and wildfire ash across the US. And you also heard about this Lahaina wildfire that happened in Maui. And so because of that, that sort of triggered us as well to sort of revisit NTM in that environment as well. And it was crazy. It was the biggest wildfire, right, in US history as well. Lahaina was really sort of pristine before the fire, and now it's completely sort of gone, right? That whole area is sort of gone. And still to this day, really sort of recovery in that area. But what we did was we partnered with the local communities in Hawaii. We went in and sort of sampled wildfire ash and sort of soil within this this wildfire area. And this is pending results, but preliminary data suggests that soil and ash from these burnt areas amongst the households and non-household areas in Lahaina actually harbor some NTM. And again, this is that pink staining of the bacteria. So if you see pink, that indicates the NTM are sort of there. And so we're looking at that as maybe a potential environmental feature that could be associated with NTM. And so we have transitioned a lot now to think about NTM in the context of the environment, not just volcanic eruptions and wildfires, but natural disasters, okay, and like sort of storms and these things and climate change. And there's this one paper that really was interesting in that it showed this is the total number of tropical storms, and this is the number of new NTM diagnosis, right? So when the storm numbers goes up, NTM numbers goes up as well too. Again, thinking about it in the context of a big natural storm that is moving the soil, right? Moving the water around, sort of shifting the environments around to potentially move the organisms as well. And this is one of the studies looking at NTM cases, number of NTM cases after hurricanes, suggesting that after a hurricane, number of NTM cases kind of spike as well too. Still very anecdotal, it's very hard to associate together, but we've been starting to think about NTM in the context of these climate changes, right? So within Hawaii, we partnered with a great sort of ecologist who helped us do this sort of ecological niche modeling. And what we can do now is actually, we know what NTM sort of look like in Hawaii. I talked a lot about that earlier, but let's predict now in the future. Okay, so if we predict in the future with changing sort of environments, how is NTM going to respond in the context of future changes? Okay, so this is a futurist, a current projection. Sort of here is NTM. This is Hawaii, right? And this is sort of temperature, okay? Just average sort of temperatures. And when you predict in the future, it's just gonna get hotter, right? We're sort of experiencing that nowadays too, is getting kind of hotter in these environments. So with that hotter temperature, could that be affecting NTM and its distribution? And so when we do these projections, for example, this is a habitat suitability projection in which the blue areas, the dark blue areas are the areas of Hawaii that have, lower NTM cases, right? It's not a good habitat. It's not suitable for NTM. But in the cases, in the areas that you see red, right, that's a more better suited environment for NTM, so to speak, okay? So these are current. So this is Mycobacterium abscessus in Hawaii, okay? So current, what Mycobacterium abscessus sort of looks like in current model. But then when you predict it into the future, this is like 2040, 2070, okay? Projections into the future, what you see here now is more red, kind of expanding out, right? Suggesting that Mycobacterium abscessus in the environment could be expanding their environment as we move towards the future. We did this with Mycobacterium gordoniae. Again, red is better habitats versus blue are less suitable habitats for Mycobacterium gordoniae. And this is sort of the future projections of Mycobacterium gordoniae. This is not one that causes lung disease. It's one of the NTMs that's sort of in the environment and whatnot, just colonizes the environment. This is Mycobacterium coloniae. Here's the current habitat suitability for Mycobacterium coloniae in Hawaii. And here's sort of the future projections. Mycobacterium chimera, part of the MAC complex, right? Current. and then future projections as well too. So as we sort of move into the future, there's a potential for these bacteria sort of emerge out from the environments as we get warmer, as we get sort of more climate change, et cetera. And this is just to show you that Mycobacterium in the context of precipitation, more rain. Okay, if we have more rain, we have more NTM. Okay, so in this slide here, really I just focus here on the right-hand side here. Mycobacterium coloniae, chimera, gordoniae, and abscessus. In Hawaii, the projection is that Mycobacterium coloniae will sustain, like no matter how much rain, no matter how dry it is, it will just stay the same, essentially, okay? So as you increase the precipitation, though, NTM numbers kind of go down. Now, we don't know why that is, it's just a projection, right? But if there's more rain, potentially we can hypothesize a few things about why those numbers sort of go down, but it suggests that some NTM may get outcompeted over others, right, in these particular scenarios. And so as we get hotter, this is again a Hawaii projection suggesting that, again, different species will behave differently, right, in different scenarios. So as climates get hotter, Mycobacterium chimera is one of the ones that could emerge over the others. And just overall, you know, if you think about future environments and how things are currently, but projecting out how they would look differently in the future, all the NTM is sort of going up, right? So, I mean, if we project into the future, potentially the range size of these bacteria can go up under future climate changes. And so with that, you know, we talk about Joe's initial reports about the initial niches of NTM, but now we know a lot more about sort of where these bacteria are found and new niches as well too in the environment related to potentially climate change, animals, wildfires, volcanic eruptions, et cetera, as well. And so now, you know, the hypothesis, and I think about this in my head, is like potentially climate changes could be increasing NTM diversity. And these could be, you know, climate sensitive respiratory pathogens. And so now I'm sort of thinking about that in the context of NTM and sort of their emergence and what it sort of means for all of us now, right? How can we sort of stop and those kinds of projections into the future as well. So with that, there was a lot of people involved in a lot of the science that I just presented here, a lot of our colleagues, a lot of our students and collaborators in Hawaii and beyond as well too, and this sort of our funding sources. And do you guys know about this Flat Stanley? Have you guys heard about this thing? Yeah, you've heard. Okay, good. There's some. So there's this, like, my colleague actually who did this ecological niche modeling asked me to take a Flat Stanley with me. And essentially it's like this little cutout person, right? Cutout person. And you take him on travels and you take a picture of him when you're traveling and, you know, post it and kind of share for the kids to sort of learn, you know, what the world sort of looks like. And so I took Flat Stanley actually on our last trip to Hawaii when we went to Lahaina for the fire. And these are Hawaii turtles, right? The Hawaii turtles. And they were all out there on that beach that one day where there is beautiful. And so these are our own. We have our own Flat Stanley, so to speak, in the lab. These are my NTM bugs that we have that I just take with us when we go to our different places to document, right, where we've sampled as well too, and where we've sort of been and where we sort of want to go as well. So with that, thank you for your attention. I'll take any sort of questions, or maybe we're at break. I'll be here too all day.